Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237 as I am continuing my Vincent Price marathon, but this is not a Vincent Price film, but it is part of the Corman Poe cycle that I've been doing. This was the third one made, but it's the last one I'm getting to. Um, Again, not Vincent Price, but it's part of that cycle, so I figured I'd just do it now. 1962's The Premature Burial. And even though Price is not in it, um, I would say story wise, this is one of my favorite ones. It's one of my favorite Post stories. Um, I think it probably could have been better if it had been Price. I mean, that's obvious. Put Price in anything, it probably would have been better. Um, Not sure why he didn't do this one, but so yeah, this was the third one made based on the 1844 short story. There are some differences in plot between this and the source material, but for most of these films, I think Corman was so familiar with Poe's style, unless he's doing something like The Raven, which was just so left field, that when he does add stuff, it fits the story. Um, I'm just reading about the production on this right now. Oh, okay. This film was financed through um, some other company. So, and the Price was under contract with American International, so he wasn't able to use Price. Um, Francis Ford Coppola was um, in assistant director for Premature Burial. But I was just reading the fun facts on the back of this. Even though it was financed through Pathé, this other company, eventually American International bought Pathé and the rights to this film. But they had already started shooting, so he probably could have used Price, but it would have set them back a little bit. But anyway, and so instead of Price, they had Ray Milland, who I've heard that name before. Ray Milland. Uh, he won an Oscar in The Lost Weekend, uh, Reap the Wild Wind, Dial M for Murder, which is a film that I have in my uh, House of Hitchcock box set, which I will start. I'll probably start my Hitchcock marathon after Price. I still have 3 Price films to get to. Hitchcock films tend to be kind of lengthy, but I am very interested in starting those films. I might even start doing one after this, just to kind of break it up a little bit. But anyway, it also has Hazel Court, who was in The Raven, which came out the following year, and it has Alan Napier, who played Alfred in the '66 Adam West Batman series. So that's really cool. And the story's pretty simple. It follows this guy named Guy, Guy Corell, who has this obsessive fear of being buried alive. He has this condition called catalepsy, which he'll faint or pass out, and it makes his body appear like he's dead. And of course, this is early Victorian era, so they don't take all the steps to make sure you're actually dead. His father also had it, and it explains that as a child he thought he heard screaming coming from the tomb, so he spent his life believing his father was buried alive. So now he has that crippling fear, and it becomes so obsessive that he goes to great lengths to prevent it. He he gets married to this one woman who I believe is the Hazel Court character. Yeah, and then Heather Angel plays Kate, his sister, and Alan Napier plays the doctor that announces him dead, who's also his father-in-law. Then Richard Day plays a friend of his, Miles. Um, his fear, he almost won't even marry his wife or his fiance. But then after he does, she she plays something on the piano that's for some reason is a trigger for him. It's melody melody to a piece of music called Molly Malone. Makes him faint. He has like a cataleptic attack, and his obsession becomes so great that you know his family has a tomb, like a big like a mausoleum that he creates this sort of escapable tomb. Like the casket he's able to open, like spring everything open, the lid, the side, the head and the foot from the inside. There's a way to open, the roof, so he can actually get out of that because obviously it's locked. And if all that fails, he's made a special little elixir that, is toxic. So if all else fails, he'll be able to take that. Because that's how scared he is of, how bad his phobia of being buried alive is. And movies like this kind of resonate with me because there's not a lot of things in horror movies that scare me. I mean, I've been watching horror movies since, my age was in like the single digits, like since I was 6 or 7 probably. I don't really get scared by anything, but um, really claustrophobic things like being buried, or I have asthma, so I don't really like the idea of not being able to breathe. So like Creepshow, being buried up to your neck at the beach and the tide coming in, that freaks me out. But also being buried alive. You know, one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Tales from the Crypt episode is it has a weird title. It's like "Dig This Cat, He's Real Gone" or something like that. The guy that has the 9 lives from a cat put into him, and then he's like a circus performer that kills himself, and he comes back. You find out he's buried alive as an act, but he's already used all his lives, and that's when he realizes it. Or movies like The Vanishing from the 80s. Just the idea of being buried alive is really fucked up. I mean, they did something on Mythbusters where they said it would be impossible to wake up buried alive just because of like the oxygen, and like 6 feet of dirt will actually like collapse a coffin. I don't really remember much about Mythbusters, so don't quote me on that, but I guess it's almost impossible to wake up buried alive. But hell, even back then, I've read that they used to have these tubes that would go all the way down, and there was a string with a bell. So if people were buried alive, they would just wake up and they'd ring the bell, and then, the groundskeeper would, it, get them out. Unless you had some asshole just walking around just cutting the strings off everyone. That would suck. You think you're fine, you pull the string and it all comes down. That's an oh shit moment. But, you know, and so the film continues, and his wife, they do get married, and his wife tells him, you know, you gotta let go of this or I'm leaving because it's too much. So they decide to, you know, to prove to him that his father wasn't buried alive, and maybe that will ease his mind. They desecrate his grave, and when he sees it, he has an attack again and faints. They all believe that, you know, he died of a heart attack. Her father, played by Alan Napier, Alfred, announces him dead. They throw him in a coffin. And here's where the film could have gone either way, because like Tomb of Lygia, it has the window, which I don't know if that was regular practice in Victorian times or just for, you know, the wealthy. But it's kind of like that other Tales from the Crypt episode directed by Robert Zemeckis. I think it's called like Murderer You or You Murderer You. It has John Lithgow in it. The episode came out the same time as Forrest Gump, which Robert Zemeckis did, so they kind of CGI Humphrey Bogart into the episode, and it's all his POV. As he's dead, but his thoughts are still alive. It kind of does that, where they're bringing the casket out, and we see through the window his eyes are open, but he can't move. And we hear his inner monologue about, like, you know, my eyes are moving, no one can see me, I can't move. He's like, oh, he doesn't say oh shit, but he's like, you know, oh shit, they're not bringing me to the tomb, they're bringing me to the cemetery. I'm fucked. And it was still suspenseful because, you know, being buried alive is something that does get to me. But I feel like it would have been a little more impactful if they didn't do that, because the movie kind of plays with, okay, does he really have this condition, or is he just really have just this really harsh phobia that he just passes out, and is he driving himself mad? So it's like, did he give himself a heart attack from fear, or is he actually having this shit? So like, if they had buried him, or like as soon as the dirt hit the window, his eyes open, or having them bury him completely, and then he wakes up as the people are walking away, that might have been a little bit more effective. But at the same time, the voiceover with, you know, because there is that level of hope that if only he could move or speak, you know, they're still carrying him, they'd be able to hear or feel him. It was still effective. But these grave robbers get to him in time, and he, you know, he gets out, kind of acts like a zombie, like he goes on a bit of like a little spree, and because he knows what happened, like why he ended up there instead of his pre-planned crypt. And the movie doesn't really come out and say why, but, you know, he starts going after his wife. He throws her in the casket with it open and starts, you know, throwing dirt on her. And then his friend Miles is like, you know, why are you doing this? And then it all builds up to, you know, he covers her in enough dirt to kill her. His sister comes in and shoots him. But then we get like a literal, really quick, almost like a Scooby-Doo explanation of how she's wearing the key to the tomb, And I guess it doesn't come out and say why. Why she, you know, because earlier they're walking through the cemetery to kind of calm his mind, and the grave robbers are whistling the same piano tune that she was playing that acts like a trigger for him. So it sounds like she was sort of setting the pieces for all of this. And then, of course, her father was the one that examined him. She was the one that had the key to the tomb that he could have easily escaped from. But it doesn't. So, yeah, she is guilty. And I thought that was a nice twist. It was, okay, he's not just pissed off and angry and getting revenge on her because he got sent to the wrong place and his fear became a reality. It was, no, she actually fucked him over, which I wasn't expecting. At one point, yeah, there is a dream sequence because there's always a dream sequence in these Corman Poe films. But it doesn't say why she did it. Like, is it because of his wealth and inheritance? Is it because he's driving her nuts with this obsession? Is she a Black Widow? It doesn't, unless it went over my head. Feel free to tell me, just don't tell me like I'm an idiot. But it really is like a quick and fast, like Scooby-Doo exposition. But it didn't really say why. It just said, yeah, she's the reason why he ended up in the ground and not his tomb. And she did it on purpose. As a whole, I actually really enjoyed this. I tend to lean more towards stuff that is rooted more in reality than the supernatural. So, okay, Reanimator is not reality, but it is a scientist. For Lovecraft, I lean more towards Reanimator than, say, Dagon, even though I enjoy Dagon. I lean more towards The Haunted Palace than, say, Color Out of Space. Even though Color Out of Space was very well made. And actually a better movie than Haunted Palace, but I like that story more. So, story-wise, I lean more towards this. And even though it wasn't made by Corman, stories like The Telltale Heart, that's my favorite short story. That's by Poe. It's my favorite short story in general. Then, say, ones like, The Raven, which was sorcerers and wizards, which was not a Poe creation. That was all Corman. But I'm probably not even making sense at this point. But story-wise, this was one of my favorite films of the cycle. But overall, I'd probably have to say Pit and the Pendulum might still be my favorite. If not, I really like Mask of the Red Death. That was excellent, which is the other half of this double pack. It is unfortunate that Price couldn't have been in this film, and then even later on, it turns out he could have been, but it was too late. But Ray Milland, he did a serviceable job. He was still believable. I still liked him. But I still really enjoyed this movie. And I enjoyed the short story by Poe. It is one of my favorite stories of his. But so that concludes my marathon of, I still have Price films to do, but the 8-film cycle of Corman and Edgar Allan Poe. So now that playlist will be done, at least for the Corman films. But yeah, definitely one of my favorites of the cycle. Really enjoyed the story. Really enjoyed the movie. That is Premature Burial, 1962. Thank you for watching.